The reform of European social models, implication for firms in Western Europe, Nakul Sehgal, ISP Fall 2015. So what are these different social models? These are basically economic systems aimed at efficient public sectors, flexible markets, sustainable finance, reasonable growth and high employment. Looking at a paper by Andrew Harper, he identified 4 different models: Continentals, Nordics, Mediterraneans, Anglo-Saxons. This was done on 2 metrics, equity and efficiency. Equity here is the low risk of poverty measured by the redistribution effort and the quality of human input. Efficiency here referred to the employment rate that was determined by the increasing stringency of the employment protection legislation. So we noticed that they are not sustainable. Why? Because of increased globalization, aging, technological change and high public deficits, Continentals and Mediterranean models are not sustainable, whereas Nordics and Anglo-Saxons can be sustainable simply because they are more efficient, and equity, as described here, is often a political choice. So what is going to happen? A shift from Continentals to the Nordics. Continentals will be forced to reform the labor markets, whereas reforms to the welfare state would be limited. This would spur a reform even in the Mediterranean nations as they chart their path into becoming more efficient economies with more or less equity. What are these expected reforms? Most of these efforts are aimed at coordinating EU-level product market reform with national labour policies that aim to complete the single market agenda of the EU. The objectives would include a liberalisation of labour markets, going beyond the Lisbon strategy, and eventually a pan-EU restructuring. I'll look at the French industry, and here we see the impetus for reform. It's an industry that's sensitive to prices, as we can see in this table. Further, we notice that therefore industry is trying to reduce the unit labor cost. And then we notice that therefore there exists now an improvement in profit margins. But is it good for the economy as a whole? No. Simply because that includes a stagnation in production prospect, that includes a slump in jobs. Why is that happening? It's happening because of huge amount of labor market regulation. It's happening because of a competition from Eurozone countries like Germany, Italy and Spain, and then, more importantly, a significant amount of uncertainty regarding the business confidence. Ultimately, these are going to be the various factors that cause an impetus for reform: labor market regulation, proliferation of standards, Eurozone competition, hiring problems and uncertainty. Looking ahead, what's going to be the firm's strategy? Reforms affect strategies, threats and opportunities faced by the firm, which have to be dealt using balanced integrated framework of market and non-market strategies. So these reforms would include a simplification of the labor code, flexi-security, which is typically German style, that is increasing number of working hours as and when required, retirement age and pension plans to be changed, strengthening of the vocational training infrastructure and easier hiring-firing laws. These could enable redundancy elimination and reduce costs, increase in the pro-reform regime status and a stable environment, differentiation by the means of R&D investments and workforce training, and a reduced bargaining power of labor unions. Renewed relationship building, new workforce management style that could include a change in employee incentives and appraisal, and working with the government would continue to remain challenges for any firm. How do they deal with this? Using a combination of market strategy that looks at cost reduction and investments, and a non-market strategy. Here, it's important to analyze the issue, which is the inflexible labor market that pulls down competitiveness and profits. Different actors, the government, the politicians, the trade unions, the CFDT, which is the employee body, and MEDEF, which is the industry body. The interests are going to be varied: growth, jobs, better working conditions, and profits and wages. Where do they meet? The cabinet, where the law is going to be debated, the parliament, where it's going to be passed, the media, which is the court of public opinion, the courts, which might just look at the law again, and think tanks, which would emerge as an activity center for any right-wing and left-wing thinking. Information that will move the issue would be the rules of procedure. How do these laws work? How do you build coalitions? The economic research that can sway opinion, and ultimately the public opinion, which will really be useful. What are the assets that you need? You need to be of credible reputation, great trustworthiness, and have an access to experts and networks. Ultimately, continental economies seem poised towards the shift towards the Nordic model, and firms would need to follow the recommendations here listed. They will have to enhance the non-market strategies, external intelligence and participating in policy setting, engaging with the community to establish a better reputation and negotiating position for the future, be ready for change management internally by preparing a robust human-oriented plan that can avoid costs. Conclusion: Europe's future is of change. It's going to change more in the next few years as it struggles with demographic shift, migration, monetary liberalization and fiscal austerity. The takeaway for firms would be to continue following the stakeholder approach and draw out several agreements that can accelerate the pace of reform. Societal implication would be to focus on new skills, vocational abilities, and make sure that socio-cultural tolerance and renewed faith exist. At the same time, there has to be a reform of institutions to work ahead for prosperity in the future. Thank you.